Okay, this video is kind of a follow-on to the one I did on the first McSweeney's catalog. And having that first catalog has been kind of a linchpin to providing focus in this project. In fact, I know where another first catalog is. Not a bad price, less than $30. The condition is it's maybe a little overpriced for the condition. Kind of leaning on it. Kind of thinking about getting it as trading leverage. I got this late 2004, early 2005 catalog from Marvin. Just lucked into it. Have not seen any other McSweeney's catalog anywhere ever. The first McSweeney's catalog does come around. I've seen a number of copies. I've been able to get a couple of copies at a good price. Except for this one, have never seen any other catalog, which is somewhat amazing. I'm kind of thinking about getting that other #1 as kind of trading leverage, possibly, if I can find some of these interim catalogs. This one has been a good one though. 2004, 2005, they're still a fairly young press. Everything is still pretty manageable. They have not exploded into the imprints, and so there's only so many titles to contend with, and the threads, although the threads are starting the tendrils are starting to go out, it's all still very manageable. So as I've been working on the first catalog, I've been watching carefully for value buys on this catalog. I desperately want the interim catalogs. That first catalog was put out in 2000. There would have been one or two in 2001, one or two in 2002, one or two in 2003, and one or two in 2004. It's hard to tell how many catalogs they put out. It depends on how they put those books out, so I can only guess. At least one catalog each year, possibly two. And I've never seen any. So anyway, very, very fortunate to have this one. I kind of have been working at it from the back, because the back is more towards the back titles. So when I start at the very back, and because I only have this one copy, and I've never seen another, every time I touch it, I'm having to be so careful with it. I'm desperate to get another copy of this one. So this is the Believer magazine. At this point, they had not branched out into the Believer books at all. The Believer books came out of the Believer magazine. And there are probably 25 or 30 books now, of which all I have is a reprint, a 3rd edition of the first one. I'd like a first printing of the very first one. Other than that, that's where I put the brakes. Because I was able to get a deal on reprints, I do have most of the Believers that would come through to the date of this catalog. I do have original 1, 2, and 3 issues. Original, contemporary, first 3 issues. So I'm good on the Believer, except for just a couple of the early ones, and they won't be expensive. It's just a matter of coming around, complete, decent quality, decent price. Not really concerned about filling that out. English as She Is Spoke. Now, this is the first volume of what became the Collins imprint. The Collins imprint is reprints, McSweeney's editions of classic books. And English as She Is Spoke is the first volume of the Collins imprint. So they did their own special introduction to the book, and this is a reprint of the original text. The Collins imprint to date is only a limited number of titles. They've only done, I want to say, 6 or 8. So it's very reasonable to get first printings of these at reasonable prices. You do have to watch for them, though. They didn't do big print runs on these. It wasn't something that would have been a big demand. So they're not tremendously expensive. You can get the very nice copies at good prices, but you do have to keep your eyes open to find them. That's the tricky part. The next book is To Rulabin and Back. And this was the second title in their Collins imprint. This is also a classic book where they have done their own introduction and released their own edition of this classic book. So it's the second Collins imprint. I was able to get a copy of this signed by the person that put together this edition of the McSweeney's edition, and so I got a very, very good price on it. Really lucked into it, the right place at the right time. Really nice copy signed by essentially the editor of this edition. Lady into Fox is the third title in the Collins imprint. They put out about one a year for the first 3-4 years, and then they backed off to every couple of years, or every 2 or 3 years they would release one. The Collins imprint is still going. In fact, there's a new one, but they're releasing them a little bit less frequently. So they started it off at about one a year, and now it's one every couple of years or so. They're adding a title. This is in catalog number 1. This is the Neil Pollock Anthology of American Literature. This is the first standalone title ever published by McSweeney's. The first standalone title. So I have this, and I do have all of the preceding books that I've mentioned, except, as I say, a couple of the Believer issues, a couple of the early Believer issues I don't have, but those will. That's just a matter of being patient and not rushing to buy something that's out there, but waiting for the right copy at the right price. This Shape They're In was also in the first catalog. So now we're into the section of kind of what would be considered backlist titles. These are titles that they already produced. So these are more in the back, towards the back of the catalog. So we have this one. Pharmacist's Mate was also in the first catalog. Now, because this is the 2004-2005 catalog, I know for certain that there were titles released in the interim that were released in earlier catalogs but are sold out and therefore are not in this catalog. The Berlin Years, which is a special collaboration with Marcel Zama, the artist. That was published in 2003. Really, really, really interesting piece, which I do have. I have the 2003 first printing. Uh, but it does not appear in this catalog because it sold out very quickly. So I don't have the catalog that it would have been in. Superbad, another title in the first catalog, still in print, still in stock. The same for Samuel Johnson is Indignant, Lydia Davis's stories. So in this catalog, quite a few of the titles take care of themselves because of the work on the first catalog. This is also true with The New Sins, which in fact was published in 2001, published contemporary to the first catalog, but not included in the first catalog. In fact, it was Lydia Davis's ISBN that was given to this book, to David Burns's book. So I don't have the story yet of whether this was a title that was in the works but not set, so they couldn't put it in the catalog, or if it's something that came together very quickly and therefore couldn't be in the catalog. I don't know. McSweeney's did re-release this in 2006. This is a 2001 hardcover, and McSweeney's released a paperback in 2006, which I do not have, and which I am looking for, and which is, as hard as it was to find a nice copy of this, it's even harder to find a nice copy of the 2006 paperback, which I do not understand, but I do not have it. I have a couple of lines on it. It's proving surprisingly difficult to get at. I, by Stephen Dixon. Really nice hardcover with a die-cut hardcover. And between the die-cut after the die-cut hardcover is a really nice illustration. And this is one I paid a little extra for to get a double-signed copy. It's signed on the illustration page by the artist, and it's signed on the title page by Stephen Dixon. A really, really nice copy. This is one that I paid the going rate for, but I feel strongly that with that double signature, it's well worth. It was a good buy. Next up, My Words Consume Me. This is a paperback original, and it's connected to Dave Eggers' 826, which is his philanthropic effort for students, young people. Paperback original includes a CD. Very hard to find. I finally got a copy in pretty decent condition. Because it's so hard to find, kind of watching out for another copy. I wound up getting this at an outstanding price, complete with a perfect CD. The book is not perfect. The book is more in a very good range, maybe a very good minus, but I didn't pay much for it, and very hard to find. So I'm kind of watching for another copy of this. Okay, this is You Shall Know Our Velocity, which is Dave Eggers' own novel. Interesting for a couple of reasons. For one, page 1 is on the cover. The text for the very first chapter starts on the cover, and the copyright page is actually on the inside of the back cover. This is one that I was well along with, and so I am well set on, and there are a variety of editions of this, and just through patience and good buys, I have the first state first printing, and I have the second state first printing. I have that signed. I had the UK uncorrected proof and the UK first printing, and I have some extra copies also that I got at very good prices, which should be profitable down the road. So in very good shape on that title. The middle stories, you know part of the story of. McSweeney's. This is McSweeney's first reprint, contemporary reprint of an existing title. Sheila Heti had been closely involved with McSweeney's for a pretty good period of time. She wrote for the Internet Tendency, she's written for the Quarterly Concern, she's very closely associated with McSweeney's. And then I come to find out her first book was actually published in Canada a year earlier, and then when the paperback came around, it was published simultaneously in Canada by Anansi and in the United States by McSweeney's. And this has a number of cover variants, as discussed. The picture, there are at least 4 picture variants. There may be more, I don't know. I know there are 4, and I have them. Been able to get nice quality copies at nice prices. Problem isn't the price. The problem is finding the book. But then when you find the book, identifying the image. Plus, Sheila Heti and friends defaced every single copy of this book with either black Sharpie or white out. So very, very interesting, making very nice progress on this book. This is also the one where they removed 9 stories that were in the Canadian edition, because this was printed right around 9/11, and some of the stories they deemed as maybe not appropriate. I'm a little disappointed with that decision, but it does add to the story. It does make the Canadian editions even more essential. Trying to find a Canadian paperback, and thus far I've not been able to come up with one. Been able to find a couple available in poor condition, so hunting that down. Speak commentary. This is a paperback original, and this is a movie tie-in book, and it's really hard to find. I have a copy in what I would call good condition, and I am definitely searching for a nicer copy. It's hard to find at all. It wasn't expensive. You know, the copy I got was like $15. And if you can find a nice one, it's not particularly expensive, unless it's in unless it's in the hands of one of these premium booksellers that has a really nice copy, but also has it at $100 or $150. So the places where I know I can get a nice copy, I'm not going there. But I am looking to get a hold of a couple more copies of this, just because it's so hard to find, and so hard to find in any kind of decent condition. So it's on the watch list. It won't shouldn't be particularly expensive when I find it and when I find a nice one, but really, really tough to find. And talk about tough to find. Jokes Told in Heaven About Babies, a 32-page paperback original. Being a 32-page paperback explains in part why it's so hard to find. It was a really small book. It was so small, I'm surprised they even published a paperback that small, that they didn't include it in the Quarterly Concern as its own story. 32-page paperback, published as a standalone. I do have 2 copies. Neither one is in particularly great condition. I would rate them both as good minus. Didn't pay much for them. Got $10 or $12 in each one. Super hard to find at all. So it's another one that is, I have several watches set for, several alerts set for. So if it comes around and a decent copy comes around, it's probably not going to be that much money. But a copy coming around is a big deal. Giraffes. This is a whole story by itself. This is the first title not in imprint, but in a series. And this is a book that Dave Eggers has a hand in writing, and it's written by Dr. and Mrs. It's written by Dr. and Mr. Doris Haggis on Way. Dr. and Mr. Doris Haggis on Way. Describing this series is a video all by itself. It's a children's book. It's a large format children's book. There are 6 in this series now. There are 6 books in this series. In fact, the 6th book is just now coming out. And they're all 64 pages. They're all 64-page children's books. And McSweeney's prints the first edition, and then it goes to Simon & Schuster. If you can find them, they're going to be Simon & Schuster. And that's if you can find them. Finding the McSweeney's edition, the original first edition, really hard. The Dr. and Mr. Doris Haggis on Way. This series of books is a video by itself. This is the first in the series. It's a funny book. I do have this. I have it signed, inscribed. Got really lucky. Inscribed and signed. Paid a little bit of money for it. But super, super hard to find, period, in the McSweeney's edition. So although I paid up for it, I feel like it was a bargain. It's in excellent condition. It's inscribed and signed, and it's the McSweeney's edition. And McSweeney's apparently just publishes just so many of these, and then he's got to deal with Simon & Schuster, where Simon & Schuster takes over. So the early copies, really hard, really hard to find. Then we have one that was totally not on my list at all. Rising Up and Rising Down by William T. Vollmann. 7-volume set. They commonly run $1,000, $1,200 a set. And as you know, I took a gamble on $400 and hit a big home run, I think. Really, you know, I'm not professional at assessing books, but I I think this is $1,000 or $1,200 set. The guy is not kidding. It is just spectacular. Um, I did 2 videos on it. You may or may not have watched the videos because they are long and boring. Stepmother. Kind of hard to find. Not super hard to find, but kind of hard to find. I do have a copy. And in this section, they're pitching the McSweeney's Quarterly Concern. And this is the infamous issue 11, which I have one of the, if not the best set in existence. I have a black copy in shrink wrap, as well as a black copy fine. I have a brown copy in shrink wrap, as well as a brown copy fine. I finally found the orange variant. Paid almost nothing for it, and it is perfection. When I was hunting the orange and the blue copies, never seeing a single orange, I had found 6 or 8 copies of the blues, either with condition problems, where the condition hadn't been priced out, or I don't want to sell at prices. But along the way, lucked into a near fine, very good plus, at a very good price. And then Max at Book Count offered me that printer's error with the upside down backward cover, signed by Dave Eggers, who had heard that they existed but had never seen one before. And the first one he ever saw, he signed, and I have it. So, good shape on the 11. The number 12 is a very, very interesting story. It's just a plain old paperback. It's a paperback with French flaps. And there's a story about that, but that's a separate story. I do have this signed, but that's really not the big story, and that's not really the big value even. The very, very first copies that went out had 4 bookmarks laid in. It also had an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper laid in promoting McSweeney's. I've never seen a complete, intact first copy of this, except for the one that I have. What I feel, it's a very common copy. You can buy a reading copy for $5. A nice copy is quite a bit more, but they're common. You can buy a reading copy for $5. But the very first ones that went out to subscribers and customers. Those very first copies had 4 bookmarks laid in, and they had this sheet of paper laid in promoting McSweeney's. I have the only copy that I know exists complete. I also have one with 3 bookmarks, 3 of the 4 bookmarks, and without the sheet of paper. I have seen here and there, I've seen copies with 2 bookmarks, no paper. So there is more story behind this, And one of the interesting things is that I am one of a very small number of people that knows that story exists. Um, so that issue is a story by itself. Issue 13 of the Quarterly Concern. This is a comics issue. And this issue was edited by Chris Ware, a very famous comic artist. And really anything after issue 13, I don't have a particular interest in whether it's signed or not. After number 13, the print runs start getting bigger. And also Eggers is writing more of his own books, and he's not signing as many. And so really after issue 10, Eggers doesn't sign a lot of copies of the Quarterly Concern after issue 10. This one is interesting because it's not even the Eggers signature that you want. It's Chris Ware. He ran the show on this issue. And an issue signed by Chris Ware is worth a lot of money. And I was able to get a double signed Chris Ware from a high-level professional dealer at a very underpriced price. It is signed on the dust jacket, and it is signed on the title page. Signed copies are valuable, and a double signed copy where you sign the jacket and the title page, not easy to find and very expensive. My copy is probably worth $250. It certainly shouldn't be priced under $250. The person I got it from had it priced at $100, and because I bought some other books from them, I have a courtesy discount of 20% if I buy directly from them and not from an outlet. And so I got this book at 20% off of $100. I got this book for $80. But I think what happened is I really wasn't thinking about it at the time because I had not really had designs on a signed 13. It just kind of, I had just gotten a couple of books from her and saw this and went ahead and got it. I just felt like it was too good to pass up, even though I really wasn't. I have a first printing. I have a nice first printing. I have a second printing still in shrink wrap. It just felt like a buy. And then when I got it, I realized what a buy it was. And I think that she did not realize, and she's very knowledgeable of McSweeney's, but I think that she did not realize that the number line on that is McSweeney's having fun, as they are wont to do. She thought this was a second printing and priced it down for the second printing, which she really shouldn't have done because it's a double signature Chris Ware, and it was signed in her presence, and the shrink wrap is still present. The shrink wrap was opened, he signed the book, and it was put back as best as possible in the shrink wrap. I think she priced it down because she thought it was a second printing. So I think I'm the beneficiary of an error there, and I think that I think that she knows she made a mistake. Um, there was some correspondence after that that asked for my opinion on the number line in this book, and I answered her back, um, telling her what the correct number lines were for the printings, and and I was at the time I really wasn't. I was just looking at the opportunity to buy this double signature at a good price, and I was aware it was a first printing. Um, but I really wasn't paying a whole lot of attention to their description of it. Um, and the pictures they sent didn't include the copyright page. Well, their description, when I went back after the fact, their description was first impression, second printing, and which is when I started to put two and two together on her follow-up inquiry as to whether she found some information later and then came to me to corroborate what I knew about it, because we've corresponded before on points of issue and what's correct. And I was happy to answer and provide her the correct number lines to look for in a first printing and a second printing. And but yeah, I think she mistakenly underpriced that. I think she mistakenly underpriced it by about $100, $150. Um, but I don't think I did anything untoward. I wasn't taking advantage of anything. Um, I was just kind of seizing the moment to buy the Chris Ware signature, and any amount of money that's more than a little bit amount of money is a lot to me, so I really wasn't thinking in that direction. So there's some more story behind the 13. Oh, I think we're still on good terms. Um, and I don't think there's any problem with this. In fact, she answered back when because I hadn't gotten the book yet when she asked about it. It was still on the way. And I said, well, the book's not here yet. This is what I know about it. And there were two printings, and this is how you tell them apart. Um, and she sent me back a nice note about it. So I think we're fine. Um, but now, 2020, putting it together, I think something triggered her to wonder if she had made a mistake in assessing that volume, and I actually confirmed that she. I think what I did was actually confirm that she did make a mistake, um, but it was an honest mistake both ways. I saw the chance to buy a double signed copy at a good price, and I bought it. And I didn't matter to me whether it was a first printing or a second printing. It was the rarity of the signature. Um, so anyway, that's a whole nother story. A Life After Exoneration. This was retitled. This is a working title. This was a working title for what became Surviving Justice. And this is the first of the Voice of Witness books. And the Voice of Witness books is 25 or 30 books now. I have a third edition of this book. This book, each subsequent printing is a subsequent edition. So I have a third edition or a third printing, which is the current edition. The first printing is about impossible to find. I'm on the hunt for it. Again, it's one of those, it shouldn't cost a lot when I find it, but super, super hard to find. Don't know how I'm going to get a hold of a first printing of this. It won't be that expensive, and condition will just be it is what it is. I'll luck into a really nice copy, or I'll run into a so-so copy. Um, very hard to find. Haven't come close to finding a first printing on that. A Child Again by Robert Coover. He also wrote Stepmother, and I do have this one. And the Stepmother one is signed, which just happened to be, it just had turned out to be signed. I mean, I knew it was signed, but I didn't pay extra for it, so I lucked out on that one. This book was a working title, did not have a title yet. It was an upcoming book. Tentatively notes Los Angeles Unified School District, and it wound up being released as a large format paperback with the title, what's the title on that? The title is Dear New Girl, or Whatever Your Name Is. Dear New Girl, or Whatever Your Name Is. It's a fun book. It's a really interesting book. I happen to have a outstanding copy. I only paid like $25 for. Trying to get a hold of another copy because it is super hard to find in any condition. I lucked into a outstanding copy at a great price, and it's another one that's not expensive, very hard to find. This is one of the hardest ones to find at all. This is Lovecraft, H.P. Lovecraft, Against the World, Against Life. This is the first English translation. McSweeney's published the first English translation of this as a paperback original. The introduction was written by Stephen King, which gives it a crossover desirability. Anybody interested in Stephen King, which is a lot of people, if they're serious Stephen King, they're going to be interested in this book that he wrote the introduction for, because it's a book that would really fit well for a Stephen King fan. Again, paperback original, the first U.S. translation. Very hard to find unless you're willing to pay a lot of money. For $100 you can have a copy. For less than $100, good luck to you. Very hard to find, even just a trashed reading copy. So this is on my target list. I did finally come up with a copy. That's a pretty nice copy. I would rate it as very good. It's pretty nice. And at $45, I feel like I got a really good buy. Yeah, at $45, I got a really good buy. You just cannot find it unless you're willing to pay a lot of money for it. This is one of those books that book dealers with inventory, they get really nice copies, super nice copies, and they price it to the moon. And if you don't, they'll die before they sell it for less than the price they have on it. This is one of those kinds of books. If you want it, you can get it. But you're going to pay at least $100 for it or more. This isn't a book I'm prepared to put that kind of money up for. I will satisfy myself with a reading copy or a nice copy or what I can get at a reasonable price. I had 2 copies fall through. copies that would have fit the bill. They were in the $50 range. The condition was right. I had them fall through. Said they didn't have the book. Maybe they didn't have the book, or maybe they reassessed the book and decided not to sell it. I don't know. But I did get a nice copy that's worth every bit of what I paid for it, and it's one I'm watching for because I'd like to have another copy, even if it's not as nice as the copy I have now. I'd like to have a copy that I feel I can read. The one I have is, I think, worth more than I paid for it, so I'm afraid to to do much with it. The Facts of Winter. This is a hardcover, the first U.S. translation. Very hard to find. Very hard to find in any condition. Not expensive, but very hard to find. It has been re-released as a paperback by McSweeney's. McSweeney's has released a paperback of this, but the original was a hardcover. I do have a hardcover in good minus condition. It was overgraded. It was not as nice as it was supposed to be. I paid $20 or $25 for it, but I still consider myself lucky to have it. I'm disappointed that it was overgraded, but it's not a terrible book by any means. I feel like I got my money's worth, although I'm disappointed that it was overgraded. So this is one that I am actively seeking a better copy of. But hard to find any copy, and then it's just a question of whether you're lucky and that copy is a nice copy or not. And to back up, I mentioned the 32-page paperback. Which one was that? Yeah. Jokes Told in Heaven About Babies, the 32-page paperback. I have gotten 2 copies of that. I don't know if I mentioned that. I've got 2 copies. Have $10 or $15 in each one. So I feel like not a bad amount of money in each one. They were both overgraded. I got them from commodity brokers, where you really don't have a say in what you get, but they had them. In fact, if you're looking for something that can't be found, a commodity broker is often the best place to get it. But it's with the understanding that you're going to take what they send you. But probably the price is going to be right and you can afford to take a chance. So I have picked up 2 copies. I would rate one in good minus, and I would rate them at, I would rate one at good minus and one at acceptable plus. As hard as it is to find, for the money that I have in them, I can't say that I'm unhappy. It's something I'm looking for, but super hard to find. Won't be expensive when I find it, but a number of these, it's just a question. Some of them are expensive and you can't find them, and when you do find them, they'll be expensive. But some of them are just not in demand and they're just hard to find. They're not expensive if you find them, you just got to find them. And the last, we're getting down to the last couple here. The Future Dictionary of America, a hardcover with a CD that they printed about 10 billion copies of. I have 2 hardcovers in shrink wrap. Did not pay much for them. It's a fairly old book, but they printed a bajillion of them. Easy to find in shrink wrap. You'll see them billed as first edition, first printing. Well, there was only one edition and there was only one printing, except that printing was a bajillion copies. How We Are Hungry. This is another Dave Eggers title. It's the last one in this catalog. Or, depending on how you look at it, it's the first one in this catalog. Because I've been going through the catalog backwards. So, How You Are Hungry is actually the first title. How We Are Hungry is really the first title being promoted. It's the newest book that's going to be coming out at that time. The picture here is not representative of the cover. Whether this was a prototype cover, I don't know. Whether this was a mock-up for a cover that hadn't yet been determined, I don't know. Those are open research questions. But there's no copy with this cover that I'm aware of. This was released in 2 states of first printings. Black leather, hardcover. The first state, first printing is blind stamped. The Pegasus is all black, pure black. The Pegasus is blind stamped, which means that the Pegasus is stamped into the cover, but there's no color added. So it's just a stamping where you see the indentation of the Pegasus. That's called blind stamping. If it were stamped with color, then that would be there are different terms of it, but you call it stamped, or you could call it letter stamped, or a couple of different things. But blind stamped means no color, which is the way it was released. The second state first printing is also black hardcover. Leather, just exactly the same. It's got the Pegasus in the center, but it has a tremendous amount of decoration on the front cover. A huge amount of decoration on the front cover. And the front cover is entirely blind stamped. So you've got the Pegasus in the center, and then you've got all of the decoration and border and very ornately blind stamped on the entire cover. And the first state, which is the true first printing, the first copies released. The first state first printing is kind of hard to come by, and he signed a fair number of copies of that first state. I do have 2 of those signed. They were not inexpensive, but I felt they were worthwhile. The second state first printing, the one that's ornately blind stamped with all the extra stamping, that one is much more common. Interesting, the first state first printing was printed in Wisconsin, but the second state first printing was printed in Canada. Still considered a first printing. One slightly precedes the other, and is considered the true first, and is printed in smaller numbers. So that's the one that I do have 2 signed copies of that I paid for, but I got a very good deal because I got them from Royal Books. And when I was first aware of them, they were not affordable, but they turned out they were a consignment book that didn't sell, and they got slashed, and I was in the right place at the right time, and basically was able to get 2 for 1, and I was very happy to pay that. The ornately stamped one, which was printed in Canada, that's fairly readily available, and I do have that. Very rarely do you see them signed. Do not have a signed one. Not particularly looking for a signed one. I'm just noting that the first state, he signed quite a few of those, and mine are signed. The second state, which is many more copies, didn't sign a lot of those. Don't know if I've even actually seen a signed one of those. Probably the only way to get one would be to take one to a signing where he's going to be and ask him to sign that while he's signing whatever his current book is. Not something I have a design on. It's just something I'm aware of as part of the bibliography of that book. So this is the catalog that I've kind of had in the back of my head as I've been working on the first catalog and been able to make some nice buys and been able to really assess where the market is on prices and availability, and been very interesting that some of these titles are hard to find but available and expensive. So there are a number of titles. You can get them. If you're willing to pay for them, you can get them. This Stephen King one, the one Stephen King wrote the introduction for, the H.P. Lovecraft. If you want it, you can go get it. If you're willing to spend $100, $150 for it. If you don't want to spend that, you've got to really keep your eyes open. And the one I got and put about $50 into, I'm afraid to open it up. It's in good enough condition that it's a collector quality thing. Really feel like I made a strong buy there. So I'm actually looking for another copy of it. Well, I'm watching for another copy of it because if I pull one out of the wild, I can sell it. If I find a really nice one, I'll sell one of these at a profit. So knowing the relative scarcity and value of some of these, I know what to look for as far as if something comes up and it's in good condition and not priced right. I know the range of prices in all of these books. Some of these books are not tremendously valuable, but they're really hard to find. But in its own way, that makes them a reasonable investment, because somebody that's interested in very early McSweeney's is also going to be looking for these books. And they're going to find the same thing I found. Good luck to you. Good luck finding a copy in any condition. So these books that aren't necessarily worth a lot of money, but are really hard to find, period, I think they're worth buying. And even buying on a flyer, where if I buy it from a commodity broker and I get lucky and it's in great condition, good. And if I don't get lucky and it's just a reading copy, that's not the end of the world on these where you just can't get them. Because they will have value to people looking for them that can't find them. And so I think there's some upside there to being very aware of these copies that don't seem to be worth a lot of money, but their scarcity is going to help them a lot, because they're so early in the company's history. They're underpriced. The problem is finding them. And so that's where we are on the catalog. Actually the number one thing on my wish list right now is more McSweeney's ephemera, more McSweeney's catalogs. I would like to find interim catalogs between the first one and this one. I'd like to have those in between catalogs, because I know there are titles that were produced and out of print before this catalog came around. The Berlin Years by Marcel Duchamp, which, as I said, I have that. It's not in this catalog. It's sold out. it probably only appeared in one catalog. I'd like to have another copy of this catalog because I'm handling this catalog carefully, but nevertheless handling it. So really, one of my top desires right now is to get at some ephemera, some catalogs. I know some of these booksellers get all these catalogs and they don't throw them away, and they throw them in a box, and they've been going in a box for 20 years. They're not that interesting to most people. They're not particularly valuable. But somebody's got a box of all these catalogs, and I need to find that guy, because that would be the biggest thing to help with the research, particularly on these early titles. So I have gone on literally for a full hour here, and so this is just kind of a run through of where McSweeney's was at the time, the beginnings of some of the imprints. Some of the imprints hadn't started yet. They hadn't started McMullen's. They hadn't started McSweeney's Rectangulars. They hadn't started McSweeney's Irregulars. So they hadn't branched out very deeply yet. They had the Believer, but not the Believer books. So it's still early enough in the company's history that it's still something you can grasp and build a cohesive knowledge base of how the company is developing. But I am just desperate to find a source for some of this early catalog ephemera. Anyway, that's the overview. I hope I've done a halfway decent job and been halfway interesting in some of the stories. There you go.